I always thought betrayal would sound like screaming and shattered glass. But it didn't. It sounded like the soft, familiar laugh of the man I planned to marry, muffled behind a hotel room door I was never meant to open. Intro, Kanal Adonis ve Oslam Masaji. Hello my darlings, welcome back to your BL boyfriend. It's been such a long time since my last video, and I have missed you guys so much. Thank you for being so patient and waiting for me. If you are ready for a brand new story full of intense drama, romance, and sweet revenge, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment below to welcome me back. Your support means everything. Now let's get right into the story. Part 1. I used to believe that love was something you built brick by brick. A quiet, sturdy house where you could weather any storm. For 3 years, Maya was my house. I mapped my entire life around her ambitions, her late-night meetings, her stress. I learned her coffee order by heart, forgave her canceled dates, and smoothed out the edges of my own life just so I could fit perfectly into hers. Tonight was our 3rd anniversary. Maya had texted me earlier in the afternoon. I'm so sorry, babe. The marketing pitch is dragging on. I have to stay at the hotel with the team. Don't wait up. It was a normal text. She was always busy. But for once, I didn't want to be the understanding, invisible girlfriend waiting at home. I wanted to surprise her. I picked up a delicate velvet box containing a custom-engraved silver bracelet I had saved up for months to buy, grabbed 2 slices of her favorite cheesecake from that bakery across town, and drove to the Plaza Hotel. The rain started just as I pulled into the parking lot. The heavy drops hitting the windshield felt like a warning, a sudden chill settling deep in my chest. I brushed it off. It was just rain. When I reached the 14th floor, the hallway was silent, lined with thick carpets that swallowed the sound of my footsteps. Room 1402. As I approached, I noticed the door wasn't clicked completely shut. A room service cart was parked right outside, propping it open just a fraction of an inch. I raised my hand to knock, a smile already forming on my lips. Then I heard it. Laughter. Soft, intimate, and breathless. It was Maya's laugh, but lower, pitched in that specific way she only used when the lights were off and we were alone. My knuckles hovered over the wood. My brain scrambled, trying to invent innocent explanations. A coworker telling a joke. A movie playing on the television. But the silence that followed the laugh was too heavy, too thick with tension. Maya, another voice murmured. A woman's voice. Smooth, confident, and undeniably rich. What about Chloe? Doesn't she usually wait up for you? I froze. The velvet box in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I heard the rustle of fabric, the clinking of a wine glass being set on a nightstand. Chloe. Maya's voice drifted through the crack in the door, casual and relaxed. Chloe is comfortable. She's safe. She doesn't ask too many questions. But you, Elena. A soft sigh. You're the one I never got over. You're the one I actually want. Comfortable. Safe. The words slid between my ribs like a slow, jagged knife. I wasn't the love of her life. I was just a placeholder. A warm body to come home to while she waited for the real thing. Something inside me, the quiet, sturdy house I had built for 3 years, collapsed into dust. There was no anger yet. No tears. Just a hollow, echoing emptiness. I nudged the door open just half an inch more. Through the gap, I saw them. Maya was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights painting her profile in gold. Her shirt was half unbuttoned. Her hands were tangled in the dark hair of a stunning, elegant woman, Elena. The way they looked at each other, the painful, desperate proximity of their bodies, it was a look Maya had never, not once, given me. I didn't scream. I didn't burst into the room to demand answers. I simply looked at the velvet box in my hand, the silver bracelet meant for a woman who didn't exist. With a strange, detached calm, I placed the box gently on the top tier of the room service cart, right next to the empty champagne glasses. Let her find it. Let her know. I turned around and walked back down the long, silent hallway. My legs felt completely numb. By the time I made it outside, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour, but I didn't care. I walked without a destination, the water soaking through my coat, mixing with the tears I didn't even realize I had finally started shedding. 3 years. Gone in a single sentence. I ended up at a high-end, dimly lit lounge downtown. I didn't usually drink, but tonight, I needed something to burn the echo of the word comfortable out of my mind. The bar was almost empty, jazz playing softly in the background, neon lights reflecting off the polished mahogany counter. Whiskey, I told the bartender, my voice hoarse. Neat. The strongest one you have. I threw the first glass back, the burn making my eyes water. It didn't help. The pain was still there, sitting heavy in my throat. I signaled for another. Celebrations usually involve smiling, a voice said. I blinked, turning my head. Sitting 2 stools down was a woman. She was striking, not flashy or deliberately trying to draw attention, but possessing the kind of quiet, absolute authority that altered the gravity of the room. She wore a tailored, charcoal gray suit that hugged her shoulders perfectly. Her dark hair was styled elegantly, and her sharp, intelligent eyes watched me with a calm intensity that made me instinctively hold my breath. She wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I'm celebrating the sudden death of an illusion, I muttered, staring back at my empty glass. The woman gestured to the bartender, paying for my next drink with a flick of a sleek black card. An expensive celebration. The price was 3 years of my life. I laughed weakly, the alcohol finally starting to blur the sharp edges of the room. Turns out, I was just the safe choice. A comfortable little waiting room until her real love came back. I didn't know why I was telling a stranger this. Maybe it was because her presence felt so grounding, so impossibly steady compared to the hurricane inside my head. The stranger didn't offer empty platitudes. She didn't tell me I was better off, or that my ex was an idiot. She just took a slow sip of her own drink and held my gaze. To be chosen as a placeholder is an insult to your worth, she said, her voice a deep, resonant hum that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. You shouldn't mourn someone who didn't know the value of what they had. I stared at her. You give good advice for a stranger. I am a woman who prefers efficiency in all things, including grief, she replied smoothly. I don't remember much after that. I remember the warmth of the whiskey, the low cadence of her voice, and the feeling that for the first time all night, I was safe. At some point, the room spun violently. I stumbled off the stool, my knees giving out. Warm, strong hands caught me before I hit the ground. You need a safe place to sleep, the deep voice murmured against my hair. Don't have one, I slurred, closing my eyes against the spinning lights. I don't have a home anymore. Then you will stay with me tonight. I woke up to the smell of fresh rain and cedarwood. The sunlight filtering through the massive, floor-to-ceiling windows was blinding. I groaned, holding my aching head as I sat up. The bedroom I was in was massive, decorated in minimalist shades of gray and white. It looked like a spread from an architectural magazine. I looked down in panic and realized I was wearing an oversized, incredibly soft silk button-down shirt. My clothes from last night were neatly folded on a chair nearby. Memories rushed back in fragments. The hotel, the betrayal, the lounge, the striking woman with the charcoal suit. My face burned with intense humiliation. What had I done? Did I sleep with a stranger? I carefully got out of the massive bed, my bare feet padding against the heated hardwood floor as I opened the bedroom door. The penthouse was breathtakingly huge, overlooking the entire city skyline. Sitting at the massive marble kitchen island was the woman from last night. She was fully dressed in another impeccably tailored suit, this one midnight blue. She was casually sipping an espresso while reading a financial report on her tablet. She looked entirely unbothered, commanding, and dangerously beautiful in the morning light. When she heard my footsteps, her dark eyes flicked up to meet mine. "Good morning," she said, her voice perfectly calm. "Morning," I croaked, nervously pulling the collar of the silk shirt tighter around my neck. "Did we last night, did we?" Her lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smirk. "You fell asleep the moment I put you in my car. I simply changed your wet clothes so you wouldn't catch a cold. Nothing else happened. I prefer my companions to be fully conscious." Relief, mixed with an absurd tiny flicker of disappointment, washed over me. "Thank you for not leaving me on the street. You're welcome. There is coffee, and my chef has prepared breakfast if you are hungry." "I should go," I said quickly, the reality of my ruined life crashing back down on me. I needed to pack. I needed to get my things out of the apartment Maya and I shared. "I've taken up enough of your time." The woman watched me with those unreadable, intense eyes. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't ask for my number. "As you wish. The elevator requires a key card. I will have my driver take you wherever you need to go." I gathered my dry clothes, changed in the bathroom, and practically fled the penthouse. I was too embarrassed to even ask for her name. By the time I turned my phone back on in the back of the sleek black town car, it exploded with notifications. 20 missed calls from Maya. A barrage of texts. "Chloe, where are you? Did you come by the hotel? The bracelet. Chloe, please let me explain. Don't overreact. We need to talk. Come home. Don't overreact." The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. Maya thought I would just cry, yell, and eventually forgive her. She thought I was too weak to leave. I directed the driver to my apartment, packed everything Maya owned into 3 large trash bags, and left them out in the hallway. I took off my promise ring, placed it on top of the bags, and locked the door. I needed a distraction. I needed to pretend my chest wasn't hollowed out. I looked at the clock. 9 a.m. I was already late for work at the marketing agency. When I finally arrived at the office, the atmosphere was chaotic. People were frantically organizing desks, wiping down whiteboards, and speaking in hushed, panicked whispers. "What's going on?" I asked my co-worker, Sarah, who was aggressively fixing her lipstick in her reflection on her monitor. "Where have you been? The buyout was finalized last night." Sarah hissed. "The parent company that bought our agency. Their CEO is here to inspect the branch personally. She's supposed to be terrifying. Everyone is freaking out. They're coming up the elevator right now." I barely had time to process the information before the quiet hum of the executive elevator signaled its arrival. The silver doors slid open. The entire office went dead silent. A group of high-level executives stepped out, looking nervous and subservient. But all my attention was locked on the woman leading them. Midnight blue tailored suit, piercing dark eyes, an aura of absolute, crushing authority. It was the stranger from the bar. The woman whose silk shirt I had been wearing just 2 hours ago. She walked with calculated precision, her gaze sweeping over the terrified employees like a queen inspecting her subjects. Then, her eyes landed on me. For a fraction of a second, the icy composure on her face melted into something entirely different. A faint, knowing glimmer flashed in her eyes as she stared directly at me, a subtle shift in her posture making my heart hammer wildly against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. My one-night savior wasn't just a stranger. She was my new boss. End of part 1. Part 2. The silver doors of the executive elevator slid open, and the chaotic hum of the office died instantly. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. A group of high-level executives stepped out first, looking pale and subservient. But all my attention was locked on the man leading them. He wore a midnight blue tailored suit that clung perfectly to his broad shoulders. His dark, piercing eyes swept over the terrified employees with an aura of absolute, crushing authority. It was the stranger from the lounge. The man whose oversized silk shirt I had been wearing just 2 hours ago in his penthouse. Silas. He walked with calculated precision, a predator inspecting his new territory. Then, his gaze swept across the open-plan desks and landed directly on me. For a fraction of a second, the terrifying, icy composure on his face shifted. The rigid line of his jaw softened, and a faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of recognition flashed in his dark eyes. He didn't smile, but the way he looked at me, steady, intense, and completely focused, made my heart hammer wildly against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. My one-night savior wasn't just a wealthy stranger. He was Silas Blackwood, the ruthless CEO of the parent company that had just bought our entire agency. "Everyone back to work," the branch manager squeaked, breaking the silence. "Mr. Blackwood will be conducting individual department reviews in the main conference room." I practically threw myself into my chair, hiding behind my dual monitors. My face was burning, so hot I thought I might actually catch fire. I slept in his bed. Well, I slept in his bed while he presumably slept somewhere else, but I had still stumbled around his ultra-luxurious kitchen looking like a chaotic, heartbroken mess. And now he held my career in his impeccably manicured hands. "Did you see the way he looked over here?" Sarah, my co-worker, whispered frantically, leaning over my desk. "I think he's going to fire us, Leo. He has that, I'm going to liquidate your department look." "Just look busy," I muttered, typing aggressively on a blank document. The morning dragged on in an agonizing state of suspense. Department heads went into the conference room looking stressed and came out looking devastated. Silas Blackwood was entirely dismantling the agency's inefficiencies in record time. My phone vibrated on my desk. Another text from Julian. "Leo, please. The bag's outside the apartment. You're not thinking straight. I love you." Elias was just a moment of weakness. Answer my calls. A moment of weakness. 3 years of my life, my sacrifices, my unwavering loyalty, reduced to an inconvenience while he entertained his white moonlight. A bitter taste flooded my mouth. I blocked the number, tossing the phone face down. I didn't have the energy to mourn Julian today. I was too busy trying not to get fired by the man who had seen me crying into a glass of whiskey. Leo Vance. I jumped. Silas's personal assistant, a man who looked almost as intimidating as his boss, was standing at my desk. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his temporary office." Now. Sarah shot me a look of pure terror. I swallowed hard, straightened my blazer, and followed the assistant down the glass-walled hallway. The temporary executive office was spacious, but Silas's presence made it feel incredibly small. He was standing by the window, looking out over the city, one hand resting casually in his pocket. When the door clicked shut behind me, he turned. Without the barrier of a crowded room, the sheer magnetism of the man was overwhelming. "Mr. Blackwood," I started, my voice betraying a slight tremor. "If this is about my performance metrics, I have the quarterly reports." "Sit down, Leo," he interrupted. His voice was just as deep and resonant as it had been in the dimly lit lounge, but the professional setting added a layer of authority that made my knees feel weak. I sat cautiously on the edge of the leather chair opposite his desk. Silas didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of the heavy oak desk, crossing his arms and looking down at me. The proximity was deliberate. "I was not expecting to see you here today," he said quietly, his dark eyes studying my face. "Especially considering the state you were in last night." My face flushed crimson. I appreciate your hospitality, sir. But I assure you, my personal life does not interfere with my work. I'm completely capable of. I didn't call you in here to question your capability." Silas cut in smoothly. He reached over and picked up my file. "Your metrics are excellent. You are underpaid and overworked. The previous management failed to utilize your potential." I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Oh." A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his lips. "You left the penthouse in quite a hurry this morning. You forgot your jacket." "I didn't want to overstay my welcome," I replied, looking down at my hands. "You had already done enough. Rescuing a drunk, heartbroken stranger isn't usually in a CEO's job description." "You weren't just a stranger, Leo," Silas said softly. The way he said my name made a strange shiver run down my spine. Before I could process what that meant, a loud commotion erupted outside the office doors. Shouting. Familiar shouting. "I don't care who is in there. I need to see him. Leo." My blood ran ice cold. "Julian." The heavy mahogany door to the office burst open. The assistant was trying to hold him back, but Julian shoved past him, looking frantic, his hair disheveled and his tie undone. He looked like a man whose perfectly constructed double life had just blown up in his face. "Leo." Julian gasped, his eyes locking onto me. "Thank God. Why did you block my number?" "You packed all my things." I stood up instantly, my hands curling into tight fists. "Julian, get out. You can't be here. I'm not leaving until you listen to me." Julian stepped forward, completely ignoring the fact that we were in the CEO's office. He reached out, trying to grab my arm. "Last night meant nothing. You're the one I want to marry. You are my home, Leo. You." He told you to leave. The voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying, absolute chill that froze the entire room. Julian stopped mid-sentence, finally noticing the imposing figure leaning against the desk. Silas stood up to his full height. The relaxed demeanor he had shown me a moment ago vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory menace. "And who the hell are you?" Julian snapped, his arrogance flaring up. "This is between me and my fiancée. Back off." Silas didn't even blink. He walked slowly around the desk, placing himself deliberately between me and Julian. The physical difference was stark. Silas was taller, broader, and radiated a quiet danger that made Julian instinctively take a step back. "I am the man who owns this building," Silas said, his voice dropping to a deadly, quiet register. "And you are trespassing. Furthermore, you are harassing my employee. If you do not remove yourself from this premises in the next 10 seconds, I will have security throw you through the front glass doors." Julian's face went pale. He looked from Silas's icy glare to me, betrayal flashing in his eyes. "Leo, what is this? Who is he?" 10, Silas counted smoothly. "You're doing this to punish me?" Julian demanded, his voice cracking. "You met someone else?" 9. I stepped out slightly from behind Silas, looking Julian dead in the eye. All the love I thought I had for him felt like it belonged to a different person in a different lifetime. "I didn't meet someone else, Julian. I just finally met myself. We're done. Leave." Julian stared at me, his chest heaving. He opened his mouth to argue, but Silas took one single, threatening step forward. Julian swallowed hard, turned on his heel, and stormed out of the office. Silence descended on the room again, thick and heavy. I let out a shaky breath I didn't know I was holding, my legs suddenly feeling like jelly. I swayed slightly, gripping the back of the leather chair. Before I could lose my balance, warm, strong hands gripped my shoulders, steadying me. "Breathe, Leo," Silas murmured, his voice softening instantly as he pulled me gently against his chest. The scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne wrapped around me, the same scent from the penthouse. "He's gone." I rested my forehead against his shoulder for just a second, overwhelmed by the adrenaline crash. I'm so sorry. He had no right to burst in here. This is so unprofessional. Silas's hands slowly slid down my arms, his thumbs brushing lightly against my skin. He stepped back just enough to look into my eyes, but he didn't let me go. I don't care about professionalism right now, Silas said quietly, his dark gaze dropping to my lips for a split second before meeting my eyes again. I only care if you're all right. The intensity in his expression made my breath hitch. I had spent 3 years with Julian, and he had never looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Silas Blackwood had known me for less than 24 hours, and he was looking at me like I was the only person in the world. Why are you doing this? I whispered, my heart racing. Why are you helping me? Silas reached up, his fingers gently tucking a stray piece of hair behind my ear. The touch was electric. Because Leo, Silas replied, his voice a low, dangerous purr. I have a terrible habit of keeping things that belong to me. And after last night, I decided I'm not letting you go back to a man who doesn't know your worth. End of part 2. Part 3. 2 faint pink lines. I stared at the small plastic stick resting on the edge of my bathroom sink, my hands trembling so violently I had to grip the porcelain edges to keep from collapsing. The dripping of the faucet echoed in the small, quiet apartment, each drop sounding as loud as a gunshot in my ringing ears. 2 lines. Positive. No, I whispered, the word tearing out of my throat like a sob. No, this is impossible. This can't be happening. I grabbed the box from the trash can, reading the instructions for the 5th time, my vision blurring with panicked tears. I wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant. I knew rare biological anomalies existed in men, but it was a 1 in a million chance. It was the stuff of medical journals, not my reality. Not now. Not when I had finally scraped the pieces of my shattered life off the floor. It had been almost 3 months since the day Silas Blackwood had thrown Julian out of the office. 3 months of rebuilding myself. I had moved into a smaller, cozier apartment. I had thrown myself into my work at the agency, earning a promotion that Silas himself had signed off on. And Silas had become a terrifying, beautiful constant in my life. He never crossed the line of professionalism at the office, but the late-night text messages checking if I had eaten, the unexpected coffees left on my desk, the intense, smoldering looks he gave me across crowded boardrooms, they made my blood run hot. I was falling for him. I was terrified of it, but I was falling for a man who treated me like I was the most valuable thing in the room. I finally thought I was free. I finally thought Julian was nothing more than a painful memory. But biology, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The math was undeniable. 10 weeks. The last time Julian and I had been together, just days before I caught him in that hotel room with Elias. I was carrying the child of the man who had called me comfortable, the man who had broken me. The next morning, the sterile scent of the medical clinic made my nausea violently worse. I sat on the paper-lined examination table, my arms wrapped protectively around my stomach, staring blankly at the wall. The ultrasound confirms it, Leo, Dr. Aris said gently, turning the monitor toward me. He pointed to a tiny, flickering gray bean on the screen. You are exactly 10 weeks along. Male pregnancies are incredibly rare, but your hormone levels are stable. The baby is healthy. Look right here. That flickering? That's the heartbeat. The room spun. Thump, 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 thump. The sound filled the small room, fast and strong like a galloping horse. It wasn't just a concept anymore. It was real. There was a life growing inside me, tying me to Julian forever. Are you all right, Leo? The doctor asked, handing me a tissue. I know this is a shock. Is your partner joining you today? I don't have a partner, I choked out, wiping my eyes roughly. I'm alone. I left the clinic with a folder full of pamphlets and prenatal vitamins I didn't remember paying for. The city streets felt overwhelmingly loud. People were laughing, drinking coffee, rushing to work. The world was spinning on perfectly normally, while mine had just been ripped off its axis. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, my heart skipping a beat, hoping it was Silas. Instead, an unknown number flashed on the screen. Exhausted, I answered it without thinking. You can't keep dodging me, Leo. Julian's voice sent a jagged spike of ice straight into my spine. Julian, I breathed, panic tightening my chest. How did you get this number? I have my ways. You blocked my emails, my socials, everything. But you can't erase me, Leo, he said, his tone a sickening mixture of arrogance and desperation. Elias is gone. I kicked him out. I told you, he was just a distraction. You're the one I'm supposed to marry. I'm coming over tonight. We're going to talk. Don't you dare come near me. I shouted, drawing the attention of people walking past. I forced my voice lower, trembling with rage and fear. "We have nothing to talk about. Stay away from me." "You know I don't give up easily, babe," Julian murmured. "See you soon." The line went dead. I stared at the screen, a suffocating wave of despair crashing over me. He wasn't going to let me go. And if he found out about the baby, he would use it. He would use the child as an anchor to drag me back into a life of second choices and hidden infidelity. He would trap me. I practically ran the rest of the way to my apartment building. When I finally locked my door behind me, the adrenaline left my body all at once. I slid down the front door, pulling my knees to my chest, and finally let myself sob. I cried for the life I had lost, for the terrifying future ahead of me, and for the child that I didn't know how to protect on my own. I must have sat there for hours, watching the afternoon sun fade into a stormy gray evening. The rain started lashing against my living room windows, mirroring the chaos in my head. Suddenly, a firm, heavy knock echoed through the wood against my back. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Julian. He had found my new address. Leo. The voice wasn't Julian's. It was deep, resonant, and impossibly steady. Silas. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my red, swollen eyes frantically. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Silas stood in the dimly lit hallway. He was wearing a long black wool coat over his impeccably tailored suit, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain. He looked like a god who had just descended into the mundane world. But the usual icy composure on his face was gone, replaced by a tight, rigid concern. "You didn't show up for work today," Silas said, his dark eyes scanning my face, instantly taking in my tear-stained cheeks and trembling hands. "You didn't answer my texts. I had my security team track your phone. What happened?" His sheer presence, the absolute safety he radiated, broke whatever fragile dam I had left inside me. A fresh sob tore from my throat. Without a word, Silas stepped inside, kicked the door shut behind him, and pulled me into his arms. I collapsed against his chest, gripping the lapels of his coat like a drowning man holding onto a lifeline. He wrapped his strong arms securely around my waist, pulling me completely flush against him. One of his large hands moved to the back of my head, holding me gently while I cried into his shoulder. "I've got you," Silas murmured, his voice a low, vibrating rumble against my ear. "You're safe. Talk to me, Leo. Who did this? Was it Julian?" I stiffened at the name. I pulled back slightly, looking up at his sharp, handsome face. "He called me. From a new number. He said he's not going to let me go." A dark, violent shadow passed over Silas's eyes. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. "He will not come anywhere near you. I will make sure of it." "You don't understand," I whispered, stepping out of his embrace, wrapping my arms defensively around my own stomach. "It's not just about me anymore. I can't completely cut him out. I can't." Silas frowned, his intelligent eyes narrowing. "Why not?" I couldn't say it. The words tasted like ash on my tongue. Instead, I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up the white medical folder I had thrown there earlier. My hands shook violently as I held it out to him. Silas took the folder. He opened it slowly. The apartment was dead silent, save for the rain beating against the glass. I watched his eyes scan the medical jargon, the blood test results, and finally, the glossy ultrasound photo pinned to the back page. Time seemed to stop. I waited for the disgust. I waited for the pity. I waited for the man who had been slowly, carefully courting me for months to realize I was damaged goods, permanently chained to another man's mistake. Silas stared at the ultrasound photo for a long, agonizing minute. When he finally looked up, his expression was entirely unreadable. A mask of pure, terrifying CEO control. "How far along?" he asked, his voice unnervingly quiet. 10 weeks, I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's Julian's. It happened right before I found him in the hotel. Silas, I'm so scared. If he finds out, he's going to use this baby to force me back to him. His family is powerful. He has money, lawyers." "Julian's family," Silas repeated slowly, the words sounding metallic and cold. He closed the folder, setting it down gently on the counter. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me. "Leo, there is something you need to know about Julian's family." I blinked, confused by the sudden shift in the conversation. "What?" "Julian's full name is Julian Blackwood." The air in the room vanished. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. Blackwood. Julian had never used his last name at work. He always went by his middle name, Vance, to avoid the Nepo baby allegations. I stared at Silas, horror and realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. No, that's impossible. He is my older brother's son," Silas said, his voice dropping to a low, heavy register. He is my nephew. I stumbled backward until my back hit the wall. The world spun dangerously. You knew. All this time, you knew who I was? That night in the bar, when you brought me to your penthouse, you knew I was your nephew's fiancé. I knew, Silas admitted, not breaking eye contact. There was no guilt in his dark eyes, only a fierce, burning intensity. Was I a game to you? I choked out, betrayal making my chest burn. Were you just keeping an eye on me for him? Making sure I didn't ruin the precious Blackwood family reputation. Don't insult me, Silas snapped, his composure finally cracking. He crossed the room in 2 massive strides, trapping me against the wall, his hands planting firmly on the plaster on either side of my head. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell the rain and cedarwood clinging to his skin. I did not watch you for him, Leo, Silas snarled softly, his eyes dropping to my lips before blazing back up to mine. I watched you because from the moment I saw you at his graduation 3 years ago, I knew he didn't deserve you. I watched him take your devotion, your light, and your loyalty for granted. I stayed away because you loved him. Because I have morals. My breath hitched. He had known me for 3 years. But the night I found you drinking yourself to death in that lounge, Silas continued, his voice turning into a raw, desperate whisper. The night I realized he had finally broken you, my morals stopped mattering. I didn't take you home to protect his secret. I took you home because I was waiting for my turn. My mind short-circuited. Silas Blackwood, the untouchable, ruthless billionaire, had been quietly, patiently wanting me for years. But I'm pregnant, I cried, tears spilling over my lashes. I'm pregnant with your nephew's baby, Silas. Everything is ruined. Silas reached up, his large, warm thumbs gently wiping the tears from my cheeks. His touch was so tender it made my heart ache. His gaze dropped to my stomach, hovering there for a moment with a strange, fierce possessiveness, before he looked back into my eyes. Nothing is ruined, Silas stated, with the absolute certainty of a man who bent the world to his will on a daily basis. He stepped back, reaching into the inner pocket of his dark wool coat. When his hand emerged, he was holding a small, sleek black velvet box. My heart completely stopped. Silas opened it. Resting inside, catching the dim light of the apartment, was a simple, breathtakingly elegant platinum band. It wasn't flashy. It was sturdy, permanent, and impossibly beautiful. Silas, I breathed, paralyzed by shock. What are you doing? I am solving the problem, Leo, Silas said, his voice ringing with absolute, unshakable resolve. Julian thinks he can use this child to trap you. He thinks his money and his family name give him power over you. I am going to strip that power away. Silas took my left hand, his thumb brushing gently over my knuckles. Marry me, Leo. You can't be serious, I gasped, shaking my head frantically. You don't have to do this out of pity. You don't have to clean up Julian's mess. I am not a man who does anything out of pity, Silas replied, his dark eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying, beautiful sincerity. I am doing this because I want you, because I am selfish, and I will not let Julian have you back. Marry me. You will have my name. You will have my protection. This child will be raised with everything it could ever need, and Julian will never be able to lay a finger on either of you. I stared at the ring, the heavy weight of his proposal pressing down on my chest. It was insane. It was a scandal waiting to happen. But as I looked into Silas's eyes, I saw something that Julian had never given me. Absolute safety. Unconditional devotion. Julian will lose his mind, I whispered, a trembling laugh escaping my lips. A dark, incredibly dangerous smile curved Silas's lips. Julian threw away a diamond to pick up a stone. It is time he learns the consequences. When he sees you next, he will have to refer to you as his uncle. Silas gently slid the cold platinum band onto my finger. It fit perfectly. So, Leo, Silas murmured, leaning down until his lips were just a breath away from mine. Do we have a deal? End of part 3. Part 4. Do we have a deal? Silas's words hung in the quiet air of my apartment, heavier than the rain beating against the windows. I looked down at the platinum band resting perfectly on my left ring finger. It felt cold against my skin, yet it radiated a strange, grounding warmth. I looked back up into his dark, intense eyes. There was no mockery, no hidden agenda. Just a terrifyingly powerful man offering me an absolute sanctuary from the storm that had become my life. Julian had treated me like a convenient stop along the way. Silas was looking at me like I was the final destination. Yes, I whispered, the word barely escaping my throat. Yes, Silas. We have a deal. For a fraction of a second, the ironclad composure of the billionaire CEO cracked. Silas exhaled a sharp, quiet breath. his broad shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch, as if a massive weight had just been lifted off them. Before I could process the shift in his demeanor, he leaned down and pressed his lips softly against my forehead. The kiss was gentle, lingering, and possessive all at once. "You will never regret this, Leo," he murmured against my skin. "I promise you." Things moved with frightening, CEO-level efficiency after that. Within 48 hours, my modest apartment was packed up by a team of professional movers who handled my cheap mugs like they were priceless artifacts. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Silas's legal team drafted the marriage documents, which we signed quietly in a private judge's chambers. No grand ceremony. No white suits or lavish parties. Just the scratch of a fountain pen, Silas's warm hand resting firmly on the small of my back, and the sudden, overwhelming reality that I was now Leo Blackwood. Moving into Silas's primary residence, a sprawling, modern fortress of glass and dark wood secluded in the wealthiest hills of the city, felt like stepping onto another planet. The ceilings were impossibly high, the floors polished marble, and a quiet staff anticipated my every need before I even realized I had one. At first, I felt like a trespasser in a museum, but Silas made it his mission to dismantle my hesitation. Despite running a multi-billion-dollar empire, Silas was home every evening for dinner. He didn't lock himself in his study. He sat with me. We talked. At first, the conversations were careful, dancing around the edges of our sudden arrangement. But gradually, the silence between us shifted from tense to incredibly comfortable. Pregnancy, however, was not comfortable. By my 12th week, the morning sickness hit me like a freight train. One Tuesday morning, I found myself kneeling on the cool tiles of Silas's massive ensuite bathroom, thoroughly losing the battle against my own stomach. I heard heavy, hurried footsteps echoing in the bedroom. A second later, Silas was kneeling on the floor beside me, his expensive tailored suit jacket discarded somewhere in the hallway. He gathered my hair back with one hand, his other hand rubbing soothing circles on my back. "I'm sorry," I gasped, humiliated, wiping my mouth with a cool towel he handed me. "You shouldn't have to see this. You have a board meeting in 20 minutes. "The board can wait," Silas said, his voice completely unbothered by the mess. He lifted me effortlessly off the cold floor, carrying me back to the massive king-sized bed and tucking the heavy duvet around me. "I am having my assistant cancel my morning appointments. Dr. Eris is on his way." "Silas, no. It's just normal morning sickness," I protested weakly, though I secretly loved the way the mattress dipped beneath his weight as he sat beside me. "You are pale, and you haven't been able to keep breakfast down for 2 days, Silas countered, his CEO mode fully activated. He pulled out his phone, already typing out orders. "I am not taking risks with your health, Leo. Tell me what you can eat. I will have it flown in if necessary." I let out a weak, exhausted laugh. "You can't buy out morning sickness, Silas." He looked up from his phone, his dark eyes softening instantly as they met mine. "I can try." That was the difference. Julian had once told me I was acting dramatic when I had the flu and asked him to pick up soup. Silas was ready to delay a multi-million-dollar merger because I looked slightly pale. The realization settled deep in my chest, warm and undeniable. This wasn't just a contract to him. A week later, the real test arrived in the form of a thick, gold-embossed envelope resting on the kitchen island. The annual Blackwood family gala. I stared at the intricate calligraphy, my stomach twisting into a painful knot. This was it. The entire Blackwood dynasty would be there. Board members, socialites, and Julian. Silas walked into the kitchen, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He saw where my eyes were fixed, and his jaw instantly tightened. He walked over, picking up the invitation and tossing it casually into the trash can. "We don't have to go," Silas said smoothly, pouring a cup of coffee and sliding it toward me. "I can send my regrets. The family will survive without my presence for one evening." I looked at the trash can, then back at him. "Julian will be there, won't he?" Silas paused, his dark eyes darkening further. "Yes, he is expected to attend with his parents, which is exactly why you do not have to subject yourself to it. I will not have him upset you." I wrapped my hands around the warm coffee mug, taking a deep breath. For 3 years, I had made myself small to fit into Julian's world. I had hidden in the shadows so he could shine. And when he broke my heart, he expected me to quietly disappear. I looked down at the platinum band on my finger. Then I looked up at the terrifying, magnificent man standing in front of me. "No," I said, my voice steadying. "We're going." Silas raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features. "Are you sure? He thinks I'm sitting in a cheap apartment somewhere, crying over him." I said, a spark of long-overdue anger igniting in my chest. He thinks he still has power over me. I want to look him in the eye and show him exactly what he lost. A slow, dangerously proud smile spread across Silas's face. It was the smile of a predator watching its mate bare their teeth for the first time. As you wish, Leo. We will go, and we will make sure he never forgets it. The night of the gala, Silas spared no expense. A private tailor was brought to the estate, outfitting me in a breathtaking, custom-made suit in a deep, rich burgundy that perfectly contrasted Silas's sharp, midnight black tuxedo. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the fragile, broken man from the hotel hallway. I looked powerful. The ride to the Blackwood ancestral estate was tense. My leg bounced nervously in the back of the sleek limousine. Silas noticed immediately. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply reached across the leather seat, took my hand, and interlaced our fingers, resting our joined hands on his thigh. His thumb traced a slow, calming rhythm over my knuckles. "I am right beside you," Silas murmured, his voice a low, grounding rumble in the quiet car. "No one in that room will dare disrespect you. If they do, I will ruin them, family or not." I swallowed hard, nodding. I know. The estate was violently opulent. Flashbulbs went off as we stepped out of the car, the press clamoring for a shot of the notoriously private CEO of the Blackwood Empire. Silas ignored them all, keeping his hand firmly planted on the small of my back as he guided me up the marble steps. The moment we stepped into the grand ballroom, the atmosphere physically shifted. The lively chatter of hundreds of elite guests began to die down, replaced by a wave of hushed, frantic whispers. Silas Blackwood never brought guests to family functions. He certainly never brought men wearing platinum rings that matched his own. We navigated the crowd, Silas parting the sea of billionaires and socialites effortlessly. He introduced me simply, without hesitation or apology. "My husband, Leo." The shock on their faces was palpable, but Silas's icy glare dared anyone to question it. I was just starting to relax, taking a sip of sparkling water, when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. A familiar, sickeningly confident laugh echoed from near the grand staircase. I turned my head. Julian was standing near a pillar, holding a glass of champagne. He looked exactly the same. Handsome, arrogant, and entirely oblivious to the storm about to hit him. He was chatting with an older man I recognized as his father, Silas's older brother. Julian turned his head to scan the room, and that was when his eyes locked onto mine. For a second, Julian froze. His brain clearly couldn't process what he was seeing. Leo, his quiet, easily manipulated ex-fiancé, standing in the middle of the most exclusive billionaire gathering of the year, wearing a suit that cost more than a sports car? A smug, triumphant smile slowly spread across Julian's face. He turned to his father, excused himself, and began walking directly toward me. He thought I had crashed the party. He thought I had tracked him down to beg for his forgiveness. "Stay here," Silas murmured in my ear, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper as he noticed Julian's approach. "Let him come to us." Julian swaggered over, completely ignoring Silas, whose back was partially turned. Julian's eyes were locked entirely on me, practically glowing with arrogance. "Leo," Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I have to admit I'm surprised. How did you even get past security? Did you really miss me this much to pull a stunt like this?" I didn't flinch. I stood tall, my chin raised, and met his gaze with absolute coldness. "I didn't come here for you, Julian." Julian let out a dry laugh, taking a step closer. "Right. You just happened to wander into my family's private estate. Look, I told you I'd come by your apartment. You don't need to embarrass yourself by." "Julian." The single word cut through the air like the crack of a whip. Silas turned slowly, stepping perfectly to my side, slipping his arm possessively around my waist. The relaxed, conversational posture he had held seconds ago evaporated, replaced by the terrifying, dominant aura of the Blackwood patriarch. Julian's smug smile instantly vanished, draining the color from his face as if he had just seen a ghost. He stumbled back half a step, his eyes wide with shock. "Uncle Silas," Julian stammered, his arrogant tone instantly replaced by nervous deference. I didn't see you there. I apologize." Silas's dark eyes were completely dead, locking onto his nephew with a look that could freeze hell itself. His hand tightened slightly on my waist, pulling me flush against his side for the entire room to see. "You are addressing my husband, Julian," Silas said, his voice quiet, deadly, and echoing loudly in the sudden silence of the surrounding crowd. "I suggest you watch your tone." Julian's eyes darted from Silas's furious face down to the platinum ring on my finger, and then back up to mine. The champagne glass in his hand slipped from his trembling fingers, shattering violently against the marble floor. End of Part 4. Part 5. The sharp, violently loud crash of crystal shattering against the imported marble floor echoed through the grand ballroom. The sound severed the lively hum of the gala like a blade. For a few agonizing seconds, the entire world seemed to stop spinning. The string quartet in the corner faltered, their bows hovering awkwardly over their instruments. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the center of the room, drawn to the spectacle of Julian Blackwood, the golden boy of the family, standing frozen with a puddle of expensive champagne soaking into his designer shoes. Julian's face had drained of all color, leaving him looking sickly and entirely lost. His eyes darted frantically from the broken glass on the floor to the heavy, unmistakable platinum band on my left hand, and finally up to the terrifying, unreadable face of his uncle. Husband. Julian choked out, the words scraping against his throat like sandpaper. A frantic, desperate laugh escaped his lips. Uncle Silas, please. This is a joke. It has to be a joke. Leo is. Leo is my fiancé. He's just angry with me. You're playing some kind of sick game to teach me a lesson, right? Silas did not laugh. He did not move. He stood with the terrifying stillness of a predator that had already won the hunt. His arm remained securely, possessively wrapped around my waist, anchoring me to his side. I do not play games with my personal life, Julian, Silas said. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, resonant murmur that carried effortlessly through the sudden silence of the crowd. And I certainly do not share what belongs to me. Leo is my husband. Your past with him is entirely irrelevant to his present status. Julian staggered back another half step, shaking his head in wild denial. No, that's impossible. You don't even know him. We were together for 3 years. You can't just swoop in and marry him. Leo, tell him. Julian looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading, begging me to break the illusion. He expected me to crumble. He expected me to step away from the imposing shadow of the Blackwood patriarch and admit that this was all an elaborate ruse to win his attention back. I looked at the man I had spent 3 years rearranging my entire existence for. I looked at the man who had called me comfortable while he was unbuttoning another man's shirt in a hotel room. And as I stood there, wrapped in the absolute, unwavering protection of Silas Blackwood, I realized something incredibly liberating. I didn't feel anything for Julian anymore. Not anger, not sorrow, just a cold, profound pity. I lifted my chin, meeting Julian's frantic gaze with absolute calm. Silas is telling the truth, Julian. We are married. I suggest you get used to it. A collective gasp rippled through the nearest circle of eavesdropping socialites. You did this to punish me, Julian hissed, his shock rapidly morphing into a humiliated defensive rage. He took a reckless step forward, his fists clenching at his sides. You manipulated my uncle because you knew it would destroy me. You gold-digging little. Before the vile word could even fully form on Julian's lips, the temperature in the room plummeted to absolute zero. Silas moved. It wasn't a large movement, but it was explosive with restrained violence. He shifted his stance, stepping slightly in front of me, completely shielding me from Julian's view. The aura radiating from Silas was so dark, so suffocatingly dominant, that Julian instantly choked on his own words, instinctively shrinking back. Finish that sentence, Julian, Silas whispered, his voice vibrating with a lethal, icy promise. I dare you. Say one more disrespectful word to my husband, and I will personally see to it that your trust fund is liquidated, your shares in the company are stripped, and you are entirely erased from this family's legacy by sunrise. Do you understand me? Julian trembled, completely stripped of his usual arrogance. He looked like a terrified child staring down a hurricane. Uncle Silas, do you understand me? Silas repeated, the command cracking through the air like thunder. Yes, Julian whispered, his head dropping in utter defeat. Yes, Uncle Silas. Good. Silas's expression remained perfectly cold. Now, since you clearly lack the basic manners required for polite society, I suggest you apologize to your new uncle. Immediately. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Julian's head snapped up, his face flushing a deep, mortified red. The humiliation in his eyes was absolute. To be reprimanded publicly was one thing. To be forced to bow to the ex-fiancé he had discarded and cheated on, elevating me to a position of authority over him. It was a psychological execution. Julian looked at me. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. He swallowed hard, the muscles in his neck straining. I apologize. Uncle Leo. Julian forced the words out, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and devastation. I spoke out of turn. A fierce, triumphant warmth bloomed in my chest. I didn't smile, but I gave him a single dismissive nod. Apology accepted, Julian. Be more careful in the future. Before Julian could endure another second of the crushing embarrassment, a distinguished, older man with silver hair and a sharp suit hurriedly pushed his way through the crowd. It was Arthur Blackwood, Silas's older brother and Julian's father. Silas, good Lord, what is the meaning of this commotion? Arthur demanded, taking in the shattered glass and his son's pale, trembling form. Then, Arthur's sharp eyes landed on me, and his brow furrowed in deep confusion. And who is this? Silas did not loosen his grip on my waist. If anything, he pulled me closer. Arthur, allow me to introduce you to Leo, my husband. Arthur's jaw practically hit the floor. He looked at Silas, then at me, and then at Julian, who looked like he wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him whole. Arthur was a shrewd man, fully aware of his younger brother's absolute control over the family's wealth. Whatever shock or disapproval Arthur felt, he expertly masked it within seconds. Well, Arthur said, clearing his throat awkwardly and extending a hand toward me. This is certainly unexpected. Silas is not known for his impulsivity. You must be quite remarkable, Leo. Welcome to the family. Thank you, Arthur, I replied politely, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, testing. Take your son and have him clean himself up, Arthur, Silas commanded smoothly, dismissing them both with a wave of his hand. He is making a scene. Arthur shot Julian a furious glare, grabbing his son by the elbow and practically dragging him toward the private corridors of the estate. The crowd, realizing the main event was over, slowly dispersed, though the hushed, frantic whispers about the new, mysterious Blackwood husband continued to buzz through the room like electricity. Once we were alone near the grand windows, Silas let out a slow, controlled breath. He turned to me, his dark, imposing demeanor softening so rapidly it gave me whiplash. The ruthless CEO vanished, leaving only the man who had held my hair while I was sick on the bathroom floor. He lifted his hand, his knuckles gently brushing against my cheek. Are you all right, Leo? Your heart is racing. I'm fine, I breathed, leaning slightly into his touch, my adrenaline still spiking. I can't believe that actually happened. He called me Uncle Leo. A dark, incredibly satisfied smirk played at the corner of Silas's lips. He will address you with respect, or he will not address you at all. You handled yourself flawlessly. Because you were right beside me, I admitted softly, looking up into his intense eyes. Thank you, Silas, for everything. You never have to thank me for protecting what is mine, Silas murmured, his thumb brushing over my lower lip. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my mouth, completely uncaring of the dozens of eyes still watching us from across the room. The kiss was meant to claim, to soothe, and to publicly solidify my place by his side. As we pulled apart, Silas's phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He checked the screen, his brow furrowing slightly. It's the London office. There is an urgent contract discrepancy they need me to authorize. I need to take this in my private study. It will take exactly 5 minutes. Will you be all right here? Of course, I smiled, feeling a sudden wave of exhaustion creeping up on me. The stress of the confrontation, combined with my pregnancy, was starting to take its toll. I'll just get some fresh air on the terrace. My security detail is at the doors, Silas reminded me, his eyes scanning the room protectively before he reluctantly stepped away. Do not go far. I will be right back. I watched his broad shoulders disappear into the crowd, feeling a strange twinge of separation anxiety. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward the heavy glass doors leading out to the estate's massive stone terrace. The cool night air felt incredible against my flushed skin. The terrace was relatively empty, dimly lit by elegant wrought iron lanterns. I walked over to the stone balustrade, looking out over the manicured gardens, and absent-mindedly rested my hand over my lower stomach. The faint, barely noticeable curve was hidden well beneath the tailored burgundy suit, but to me, it felt like the center of the universe. So it's true. The voice came from the shadows to my left. My blood ran instantly cold. I turned sharply. Julian stepped out from behind a large stone pillar, out of sight of the security guards at the door. He had discarded his champagne-soaked shoes and was pacing toward me like a caged, desperate animal. You shouldn't be out here, Julian, I said, my voice steady, though my heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm. Your uncle will be back in less than 5 minutes. I don't care, Julian snapped, closing the distance between us until he was only a few feet away. His eyes were bloodshot, manic. I needed to see you without his guard dog routine. I needed to look at you and figure out how the hell you managed to pull off the greatest con in our family's history. It's not a con, I said coldly, crossing my arms over my chest to hide my stomach. We are married. That is the reality. Now leave me alone. You don't love him. Julian hissed, his voice cracking with desperation. He reached out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was entirely too tight. You loved me, Leo. You begged me to stay that night. You cried for me. You can't just switch that off and marry the most terrifying man I know. You're doing this because of Elias, aren't you? You wanted to hurt me as much as I hurt you. Let go of me, I demanded, trying to yank my arm back, but his grip tightened painfully. No, tell me the truth. Julian leaned in, his eyes wildly searching my face. Why him? Of all the people in the world, why my uncle? What is he giving you that I couldn't? He's giving me loyalty. I spat, the anger finally boiling over. I shoved him hard with my free hand, breaking his grip. He's giving me respect. He would never look at another person while he had me. He looks at me like I am the only thing that matters, Julian. You looked at me like I was a convenience. A backup plan. I married him because he is 10 times the man you will ever be. Julian stumbled back, the words hitting him like physical blows. He stared at me, his chest heaving, his arrogance completely shattered by the absolute conviction in my voice. But as he stared at me, his manic gaze slowly drifted downward. He noticed the way I was breathing heavily. He noticed the slight, protective way my hands had instinctively curled over my lower abdomen after I shoved him. He noticed the subtle change in my posture. Julian's eyes widened. The anger in his expression suddenly morphed into something entirely different. A chilling, horrifying realization. You've changed, Julian whispered, his voice dropping to a trembling, horrified murmur. He took a slow step toward me, his eyes locked on my stomach. You're sent, you look tired. You're holding yourself differently. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced straight through my chest. Stay back, Julian. Leo. Julian breathed, his face going completely slack with shock as he did the math in his head. The timeline. The sudden, incredibly rushed marriage to the most powerful man in the family. The fierce, overprotective way Silas was guarding me. You're pregnant, Julian gasped, the words hanging in the cool night air like a death sentence. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying, obsessive light. You're pregnant, and it's mine. End of part 5. Part 6. You're pregnant, Julian gasped, the words hanging in the cool night air like a death sentence. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying, obsessive light. You're pregnant, and it's mine. The silence on the terrace was deafening, broken only by the distant, muffled sound of the orchestra playing inside the ballroom. The blood drained completely from my face. My worst fear, the very reason I had agreed to Silas's sudden proposal, was standing right in front of me, staring at my stomach with a sickening mix of triumph and possessive hunger. You're delusional, I said, my voice shaking despite my desperate attempt to keep it steady. I took a step back, my shoulders hitting the cold stone of the balustrade. There was nowhere else to go. Don't lie to me, Leo. Julian hissed, his eyes wide and manic as he closed the distance between us. The timeline fits perfectly. It was right before you left. Right before you found me at the hotel. You're carrying my child, and you thought you could just hide it by marrying my uncle? I didn't marry him to hide. I fired back, my hands instinctively covering my abdomen, a fierce, protective maternal instinct roaring to life inside me. I married him to protect myself from you. This child has nothing to do with you. You lost any right to us the moment you chose Elias over me. Julian let out a dark, incredulous laugh, running a trembling hand through his hair. The shock was fading, rapidly replaced by a terrifying, arrogant entitlement. Lost my right, Julian scoffed, stepping so close I could smell the stale champagne on his jacket. Leo, this changes everything. You have Blackwood blood growing inside you. My blood. Do you honestly think I'm going to let another man, let alone my own uncle, raise my heir? You belong to me. This baby belongs to me. The baby belongs to no one but me. I shouted, the panic rising in my throat. Stay away from me, Julian. You're coming with me right now, Julian growled, his face twisting into an ugly mask of desperation. He reached out, his fingers wrapping painfully around my wrist, trying to yank me away from the stone railing. We're leaving. I'm taking you out of here, and we are going to fix this. I'll get rid of Elias. I'll give you whatever you want. But you are not staying with Silas. Let go of me. You're hurting me. I struggled, trying to pry his fingers off my arm, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs. Remove your hand from my husband, Julian, before I remove it from your arm entirely. The voice didn't come as a shout. It was a low, lethal vibration that seemed to drop the temperature of the entire terrace to absolute zero. Julian froze. His grip on my wrist slackened, just enough for me to rip my arm away. Silas stepped out from the heavy velvet curtains of the terrace doors. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like an executioner. The aura radiating off him was so dark, so violently oppressive, that the air itself felt heavy. His midnight black tuxedo seemed to absorb the dim light around him as he walked slowly, deliberately, down the stone steps toward us. Julian stumbled backward, his manic confidence instantly shattering into pure, unadulterated terror. "Uncle Silas, wait, you don't understand." Silas didn't even look at Julian. His dark, burning eyes were locked entirely on me. He crossed the terrace in a few massive strides, wrapping his arm around my waist and pulling me flush against his solid, warm chest. I practically collapsed against him, burying my face in his shoulder, my whole body trembling with adrenaline and fear. "Did he hurt you?" Silas murmured against my hair, his voice suddenly painfully gentle, a stark contrast to the murderous energy radiating from his body. "No," I choked out, gripping the lapels of his jacket tightly. "He knows, Silas. He figured it out." I felt the muscles in Silas's back instantly turn to steel. He slowly turned his head, his piercing gaze finally landing on his nephew. Julian was pale, shaking like a leaf, but the delusion in his mind pushed him to speak. "He's carrying my child, Uncle Silas. You can't do this. You can't steal my fiancé and my baby. That is my blood. The family will never stand for this." For a long, agonizing moment, Silas said nothing. He simply stared at Julian with a look of such absolute, crushing disdain that it made Julian instinctively shrink back. "Your blood," Silas repeated, the words dripping with a cold, mocking venom. "Biology is a trivial technicality, Julian. It takes mere seconds to create life. It takes power, devotion, and an unbreakable will to protect it. You possess none of those things." "It's my baby," Julian shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "It is a Blackwood," Silas corrected, his voice echoing with absolute, terrifying authority. "And as the patriarch of this family, what is mine stays mine. This child will be born with my name. It will be raised in my home. It will inherit my empire. In the eyes of the law, the public, and this family, I am the father. You are nothing but a discarded mistake." Julian staggered as if he had been physically struck. Tears of humiliation and rage welled in his eyes. "You can't do this. I'll tell the press. I'll tell my father. I'll demand a paternity test." Silas let out a low, dark chuckle that held absolutely no humor. It was the sound of a predator cornering its prey. "Do it," Silas challenged softly, taking one single, menacing step toward Julian while keeping me securely tucked behind him. "Breathe a single word of this to the press, or to your father. Demand a test. And I promise you, Julian, before the sun sets the very next day, I will dismantle your entire life." Julian swallowed hard, his eyes wide with horror. "I will freeze your accounts," Silas continued, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I will have you exiled from the board. I will personally ensure that every door in this city is slammed in your face, and I will bury you under so much legal and financial ruin that you will forget what it feels like to sleep indoors. You will not exist. Do we understand each other?" The absolute certainty in Silas's voice completely broke whatever fight Julian had left. He realized, in that moment, that he was utterly powerless. His money, his name, his arrogance, none of it meant anything against the man who controlled the entire Blackwood dynasty. "Yes," Julian whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek as he looked at me one last time, realizing he had truly lost everything. "Yes, I understand." "Get out of my sight," Silas commanded, turning his back on his nephew as if he were nothing more than an insect. "If you ever approach my husband again, I will not bother with financial ruin. I will simply end you." Julian didn't say another word. He turned and practically ran back inside the estate, disappearing into the shadows. The moment he was gone, the ironclad tension in Silas's body seemed to dissolve. He turned fully toward me, cupping my face in both of his large, warm hands. His thumbs gently wiped away the stray tear that had escaped my eye. "I am so sorry, Leo," Silas murmured, his dark eyes filled with a raw, painful regret. "I told you I would protect you, and I left you alone. It will never happen again." "It's not your fault," I whispered, leaning into his touch, feeling an overwhelming wave of exhaustion wash over me. He surprised me. "Silas, what if he actually tells someone? What if he tries to take the baby?" "He won't," Silas said with absolute certainty, pressing a firm, reassuring kiss to my forehead. "He is a coward who values his wealth above all else. He knows I will strip him of it without hesitation. You are safe. The baby is safe. I've got you." As the adrenaline finally left my system, a sudden, sharp cramp ripped through my lower abdomen. I gasped, my knees buckling slightly as I gripped Silas's arms. "Leo!" Silas caught me instantly, sweeping me up into his arms before I could even process the pain. The panic in his voice was raw and unfiltered. "What is it? Are you hurt?" "My stomach," I groaned, burying my face in his neck as another wave of pressure hit. "It hurts, Silas. It really hurts." "Hold on to me," Silas commanded, his chest heaving. He didn't carry me back through the crowded ballroom. He bypassed the main doors entirely, carrying me down the side steps of the terrace toward the private driveway. He barked an order into his earpiece, and within 30 seconds, the sleek black limousine pulled up, the rear door flying open. "Drive. Now. And call Dr. Eris to the estate immediately." Silas ordered the driver as he slid into the back seat, pulling me onto his lap. The ride back to our estate was a blur of agonizing tension. Silas didn't let me go for a single second. He held me tightly against his chest, one hand buried in my hair, the other resting firmly over my cramping stomach. He was whispering to me, a constant stream of low, grounding reassurances, but I could feel the rapid, terrified beating of his heart against my cheek. By the time we arrived, Dr. Eris was already waiting in the grand foyer. Silas carried me straight upstairs to the master bedroom, laying me gently on the massive bed. The next hour was a haze of medical examinations, hushed conversations, and the terrifying fear that the stress of the confrontation had harmed the baby. Silas paced at the foot of the bed like a caged panther, his eyes never leaving my face. Finally, Dr. Eris packed away his portable ultrasound machine and offered a reassuring smile. "The baby is perfectly fine, Mr. Blackwood," the doctor said, looking between the two of us. The cramping was brought on by a severe spike in adrenaline and stress. In male pregnancies, the abdominal muscles are incredibly sensitive during the first trimester. Leo needs complete bed rest for the next 48 hours, and he needs to avoid any emotional distress. I let out a shaky breath, falling back against the pillows, tears of pure relief spilling over my lashes. Silas stopped pacing. He escorted the doctor out of the room with a quiet, tense word of thanks. When the heavy bedroom door clicked shut, the silence in the room was deafening. Silas walked slowly back to the bed. He removed his suit jacket, tossing it carelessly onto a chair, and loosened his tie. The invincible CEO was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had just narrowly survived the end of the world. He climbed onto the bed beside me, propping himself up on one elbow. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his dark eyes tracing the lines of my exhausted face as if he were memorizing it. Then, slowly, reverently, he moved his hand and placed it flat over my lower stomach. The warmth of his palm seeped through the fabric of my shirt, instantly soothing the lingering ache in my muscles. "Silas," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I have never been terrified in my entire life," Silas confessed, his voice a ragged, raw whisper. His thumb began to stroke slow, comforting circles over my skin. "When you doubled over in pain, I thought I was losing everything that mattered to me." "We're okay," I promised, covering his hand with my own. "We're both okay. Because of you." Silas leaned down, pressing his forehead against mine, his breath mingling with mine. "Julian was wrong about one thing tonight." "What?" I asked softly. Silas shifted his gaze downward, looking directly at the spot where his hand rested over our child. "He called it his baby," Silas murmured, the fierce, unwavering devotion in his voice making my heart ache in the most beautiful way possible. "But he is wrong. I don't care about biology. I don't care about genetics. The moment I put my ring on your finger, this child became mine. I am its father, and I will burn the world down before I let anyone take either of you away from me." He pressed a tender, lingering kiss to my stomach, sealing the promise into my skin. For the first time since I saw those two pink lines, the fear completely vanished. Julian was a ghost. The past was dead. I was exactly where I belonged, safe in the arms of a man who loved me enough to rewrite reality itself. But as the heavy exhaustion finally pulled me into sleep, I didn't know that the shattered glass at the gala wasn't the only thing Julian had broken. A seed of doubt had been planted in the Blackwood family, and Silas's older brother, Arthur, was not a man who ignored family secrets. End of Part 6. Part 7. The 48 hours of mandatory bed rest prescribed by Dr. Eris felt less like a medical requirement and more like being wrapped in an impenetrable, luxurious cocoon. Silas did not leave the master bedroom. He didn't just cancel his morning meetings. He entirely relocated the command center of the Blackwood Empire to the velvet armchair, sitting 3 feet from my side of the bed. I woke up on the second morning to the soft, rhythmic sound of him typing on his laptop, a Bluetooth earpiece blinking discreetly as he silently directed global mergers while simultaneously keeping a terrifyingly close eye on my breathing. He was wearing a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers, his hair slightly rumpled from running his hands through it. Without the sharp armor of his tailored suits, he looked softer, more approachable. But the moment I shifted against the silk sheets, his head snapped up, his dark eyes instantly scanning my face for any sign of pain. "I'm fine," I murmured sleepily, pulling the heavy duvet up to my chin. "You don't have to stare at me like I'm made of spun glass, Silas. The cramping is completely gone." Silas didn't smile. He closed his laptop with a soft click and removed his earpiece, tossing them onto the bedside table. He moved to the edge of the mattress, his large hand gently brushing a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "You terrified me, Leo," he said, his voice a low, rough rumble. "Until Dr. Eris officially clears you this afternoon, you are not moving from this bed. If you need anything, you ask me. I need you to stop running a multi-billion-dollar corporation from an armchair just to watch me sleep." I teased weakly, though my heart swelled at the absolute devotion in his eyes. "The board is probably terrified you've been kidnapped." "The board knows exactly who is in charge," Silas replied dismissively. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, his touch incredibly tender. "My empire can survive without my physical presence for 2 days. But I cannot survive if something happens to you. You are my priority. Everything else is secondary." The absolute certainty in his words made my breath hitch. I leaned into his palm, closing my eyes. "What happened to Julian?" I asked softly, the memory of the terrace still sending a cold shiver down my spine. Silas's jaw tightened, the muscles ticking beneath his skin. "I had my security team escort him from the estate immediately after the gala. By dawn yesterday, I signed the executive orders. He has been stripped of his local executive titles and transferred to a minor subsidiary branch in Geneva, Switzerland. His accounts are heavily monitored. He will not be returning to this continent anytime soon." "Geneva." I opened my eyes, stunned. "You exiled him?" "I removed a threat," Silas corrected coldly. "He will live comfortably, but he will have no power, no influence, and absolutely no access to you. He is gone, Leo." A massive wave of relief washed over me. Julian was thousands of miles away. The nightmare was finally over. Before I could say anything else, Silas's private secure phone buzzed sharply on the table. It was a specific ringtone, one reserved only for his highest-level international fixers. He glanced at the screen, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. "I have to take this," he muttered, leaning down to press a firm kiss to my forehead. "It is a secure line in my study. I will be gone exactly 10 minutes. Do not get up. If you need water, ring the bell for the staff." "I'll be fine, Silas. Go." I smiled reassuringly. He hesitated for another second before standing up and striding out of the room, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him. The master bedroom suddenly felt incredibly quiet. I settled back against the pillows, resting my hand over my stomach. The fear that had gripped me 2 nights ago was entirely gone. Silas had built a fortress around us. For the first time in months, I felt completely, untouchably safe. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I was just starting to drift back to sleep when the heavy oak door creaked open. "Silas, did you fix the—" I started, turning my head. The words died in my throat. It wasn't Silas. Standing in the doorway, dressed in an immaculate gray suit and holding a silver-tipped walking cane, was Arthur Blackwood, Silas's older brother, Julian's father. My blood instantly turned to ice. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, my voice trembling as I instinctively pulled the duvet tighter around my body. Silas's security team was supposed to be impenetrable. Arthur closed the door behind him with a soft, ominous click. His expression was cold, calculating, and filled with a simmering, aristocratic rage. "I am the older brother of the patriarch, Leo. The staff may fear Silas, but they still respect the bloodline." A newly hired maid was easily convinced to look the other way. He walked slowly into the room, his sharp eyes scanning the space. He took in the tray of prenatal vitamins on the dresser, the medical chart Dr. Eris had left on the table, and finally my pale, tense face. "My son called me yesterday," Arthur said, his voice eerily calm, though it carried a dangerous edge. He was frantic, babbling like a madman. He told me Silas had forcibly transferred him to Geneva, stripped his access codes, banished him from the family holdings. Arthur stopped at the foot of the bed, gripping his cane with white-knuckled intensity. "Julian has always been arrogant, but he has never been terrified. Not until yesterday," Arthur continued, his eyes narrowing to incredibly sharp slits. "He kept rambling about bloodlines, about thieves. He told me to ask Silas about the timeline of your sudden, miraculous marriage." Panic clawed at my throat. I reached subtly for the staff call button resting on the nightstand, but Arthur noticed the movement and slammed the tip of his cane against the hardwood floor. Leave it, Arthur snapped, dropping the polite facade entirely. I am not here to hurt you. I am here for the truth. Silas has never cared for romance. He is a machine built to accumulate power. And yet, he marries my son's discarded fiancée overnight, elevates him above the rest of the family, and places him under armed guard and bed rest. Arthur stepped closer to the side of the bed, his gaze dropping to my stomach. It doesn't take a genius to put the pieces together, Leo, Arthur hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Julian told me everything about your relationship. He told me the dates. You are not carrying Silas's child. You are carrying my grandson, and you and my brother are trying to steal him from my lineage. Get out of this room, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, though my heart was hammering violently against my ribs. You have no right to be here. This child belongs to Silas and me. Do not lie to me. Arthur snarled, his face twisting with fury. That child has my son's blood. Silas is barren. Everyone in the family knows he has no interest in heirs. He is using you to secure a child he couldn't have himself, and he is punishing Julian to keep the secret buried. I will not allow it. I will expose this entire farce to the board. I will demand a paternity test, and I will ruin. You will do absolutely nothing. The voice came from the doorway, and it didn't just command attention. It demanded absolute, terrifying submission. I gasped in relief. Arthur whipped around, his face instantly losing its color. Silas stood in the open doorway. If he had looked like an executioner on the terrace with Julian, he looked like a god of war now. The sheer, suffocating rage rolling off his body was so intense it felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped. His dark eyes were fixed on his older brother with a murderous, unblinking glare. Silas stepped into the room, locking the heavy door behind him with a loud, final click. Silas, Arthur stammered, his bravado instantly crumbling in the face of his brother's absolute authority. I came to uncover the truth. You cannot steal Julian's child and expect me to remain silent. It is a violation of our families. Before Arthur could finish his sentence, Silas moved. He crossed the room in 3 massive, terrifying strides, grabbing Arthur by the lapels of his expensive gray suit and slamming him violently against the nearest wall. The thud echoed like a gunshot. Arthur gasped, his silver cane clattering uselessly to the floor. Silas, I cried out, terrified, pushing myself up against the headboard. Silas didn't even look at me. His entire focus was locked on his brother, his large hands gripping Arthur's jacket so tightly the fabric was tearing. How dare you, Silas growled, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that shook the walls. How dare you bribe my staff, enter my private sanctuary, and threaten my husband in his own bed? Have you lost your mind, Arthur? Or simply your will to live? It's the truth, Arthur choked out, struggling weakly against Silas's iron grip. That is Julian's child. You are trying to rewrite our bloodline. I am the bloodline. Silas roared, the absolute, terrifying power of the Blackwood patriarch finally unleashing. I built this empire. I pulled this family out of the financial ruin you and your incompetent son dragged it into. You hold your titles, your wealth, and your pathetic little pride entirely because I allow it. Arthur trembled, his eyes wide with sheer terror as he stared into the face of a man who held his entire existence in the palm of his hand. Listen to me very carefully, Arthur, Silas whispered, his voice dropping to a chilling, deadly quiet. He leaned in until he was inches from his brother's face. The child Leo is carrying is mine. It is my heir. It is a Blackwood, and it will inherit everything I have built. Julian is a forgotten footnote. If you ever breathe a single word of your delusional theories to the board, the press, or anyone else, I will not just exile you like I did your son. Silas released his grip slightly, only to press his forearm brutally against Arthur's collarbone, pinning him tighter. I will liquidate your shares, Silas promised, his eyes burning with black fire. I will seize your estates. I will freeze your accounts, and I will cast you out onto the street with nothing but the suit on your back. You will watch your legacy burn to ash, and I will not lose a single second of sleep over it. Do you understand me, brother? Arthur was hyperventilating, the absolute reality of Silas's threat crushing the last remnants of his pride. He knew Silas wasn't bluffing. Silas never bluffed. Yes, Arthur wheezed, tears of humiliation shining in his eyes. Yes, Silas. I understand. Pick up your cane, Silas commanded, stepping back and brushing his own hands off as if he had just touched something vile. And get out of my house. If I ever see you within 50 feet of my husband again, I will break your legs. Arthur didn't hesitate. He scrambled to pick up his cane, his hands shaking violently. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Silas. He practically ran out of the room, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, ringing with the aftermath of Silas's explosive rage. Silas stood frozen for a moment, his chest heaving as he fought to rein in the violent adrenaline. Then he turned to me. The moment his eyes met mine, the murderous CEO vanished. He crossed the room instantly, sitting on the edge of the bed and pulling me securely into his arms. I buried my face in his neck, my hands clutching desperately at his sweater, my heart still racing. "I'm sorry," Silas murmured fiercely, burying his face in my hair, his arms wrapping around me so tightly it felt like he was trying to shield me from the world with his own body. "I am so damn sorry, Leo. I should never have left the room. I will fire the entire security detail. I will replace the entire staff. No one will ever touch you. I swear it. He knows, Silas." I sobbed quietly against his collarbone. "He knows it's Julian's. What if he talks?" "He won't talk," Silas promised, his voice vibrating against my chest. He pulled back just enough to frame my face in his large, warm hands, forcing me to look into his intense, fiercely devoted eyes. "Arthur is a coward. He loves his money more than he loves his son. I broke him, Leo. He will never speak of this again." Silas pressed his forehead against mine, his thumbs gently wiping away my tears. "You are safe," Silas whispered, his breath warm against my lips. "You and our child are safe. I will be your shield, Leo. Against my family, against the world. I will never let anyone hurt you again." I looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but absolute, unbreakable love. The fear slowly melted away, replaced by a profound, overwhelming warmth. Julian had broken my heart, but Silas had taken the shattered pieces and built a fortress out of them. "I love you," I whispered, the words slipping out naturally, beautifully, without a shadow of a doubt. Silas's breath caught. His dark eyes widened slightly, the raw vulnerability in his expression completely undoing me. He closed the distance, pressing his lips to mine in a kiss that was desperate, deep, and fiercely possessive. It was a promise sealed in fire. We stayed like that for a long time, tangled in the silk sheets, the outside world completely locked away. Silas rested his hand gently over my stomach, his thumb stroking slow, soothing circles as my breathing finally steadied. The nightmare was over. The threats had been neutralized. We were finally free to build our life together. But thousands of miles away, in a cold, sterile apartment in Geneva, Julian Blackwood was staring at his frozen bank accounts. The humiliation and rage had festered into something dark and highly dangerous. He knew he couldn't fight his uncle head-on, but Julian had one last card to play. If he couldn't have Leo and his child, he would make sure Silas lost everything. Julian picked up his phone, dialing a number that belonged to Silas's most ruthless corporate rival. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. End of Part 7. Part 8. 5 months later, the world outside the Blackwood estate was covered in a thick, pristine blanket of winter snow, but inside, my reality was entirely insulated, warm, and terrifyingly perfect. I was officially 8 months pregnant. My reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the master bedroom was still something I was getting used to. The tailored burgundy suits were long gone, replaced by oversized, incredibly soft cashmere sweaters that Silas had custom-ordered to drape comfortably over my heavy, rounded stomach. I rested my hands on the noticeable curve, feeling a sudden, sharp kick against my palm. I let out a soft gasp, a smile instantly breaking across my face. "Easy in there," I whispered, rubbing soothing circles over the fabric. "Is he restless again?" I looked up. Silas was leaning against the heavy oak doorframe of the bedroom, holding a steaming mug of herbal tea. He was dressed in his signature dark suit, his tie perfectly knotted, looking every inch the ruthless, untouchable billionaire who ruled the city. But the moment his dark eyes dropped to my stomach, the icy CEO vanished, replaced by a level of devotion that still took my breath away. He crossed the room, setting the mug on the nightstand before wrapping his arms securely around me from behind. He rested his chin on my shoulder, his large, warm hands covering mine over the baby. Right on cue, another strong kick pushed against his palm. Silas let out a low, incredibly soft chuckle, pressing a kiss to the side of my neck. "He is strong. He's going to be just as stubborn as you are, Leo. He gets his dramatic timing entirely from you," I teased, leaning back into his solid chest. "I have no idea what you mean," Silas murmured, his hands gently mapping the curve of my stomach. "I am the picture of reason and restraint." I laughed out loud. "Silas, you bought out an entire pediatric hospital wing last week, just to ensure Dr. Eris would be the only physician on call when I go into labor. You fired a private chef because he used a spice I casually mentioned gave me mild heartburn. You are a tyrant." "I am a man who protects his family," Silas corrected smoothly, turning me around so he could look into my eyes. His expression turned serious, the dark depths of his gaze filled with that familiar, burning intensity. I promised you a life where you would never have to worry about anything ever again. I intend to keep that promise. I reached up, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. The fear that had plagued my early pregnancy was entirely gone. Arthur had remained completely silent, terrified into submission. Julian was a ghost, exiled in Geneva, his name rarely spoken in the Blackwood halls. I was safe. I was loved. I know you do, I whispered, pulling him down for a slow, deep kiss. You have a major press conference today. The annual shareholders' address. You shouldn't be late. Silas sighed against my lips, clearly reluctant to leave. It will be exactly 2 hours. My security detail is posted at every entrance. Do not leave the estate, Leo. The roads are icy, and the press is swarming downtown. I'm not going anywhere, I promised, taking the tea from the nightstand. Go terrorize your board of directors. I'll be right here when you get back. Silas pressed one last, lingering kiss to my forehead and another to my stomach before striding out of the room. I didn't know that miles away, in the heart of the city's financial district, the ghost I thought we had buried was preparing to burn our entire world to the ground. The grand auditorium of the Blackwood Enterprises headquarters was packed to the brim. Flashes from hundreds of cameras illuminated the room like a lightning storm. Every major financial news outlet was present. Silas Blackwood was expected to announce record-breaking quarterly profits and, rumors suggested, the establishment of a massive new trust fund for his unborn heir. Silas stood at the podium, his presence commanding absolute silence. He looked immaculate, unbothered, and terrifyingly powerful. But in the back row, hidden beneath a heavy wool coat and a dark scarf, sat Julian Blackwood. Julian's eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt from months of simmering, toxic rage in his Geneva exile. He hadn't come alone. Sitting next to him, wearing a smug, predatory smile, was Victor Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Global, Silas's most vicious corporate rival. Julian had spent months plotting. He had handed Sterling the ultimate weapon, the scandal of the century. He had given Sterling the timeline, the medical records he had illegally bribed out of a clinic nurse, and the absolute certainty that the child Silas was claiming as the Blackwood heir was biologically Julian's. In exchange, Sterling had promised to publicly ruin Silas, crash Blackwood stock, and give Julian a seat on his own executive board. Are you ready, kid? Sterling whispered, checking his gold Rolex. Wait until he announces the trust. Then we break him. Julian's hands were shaking with a mix of fear and adrenaline. I'm ready. He stole my life. I'm taking it back. At the podium, Silas adjusted the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, his deep voice resonated through the massive speakers. This year has been unprecedented for Blackwood Enterprises. But today, I am not merely speaking as a CEO. I am speaking as a father. Effective immediately, I am establishing the Leo Blackwood Legacy Trust, securing the future of my husband and my heir. The room erupted into applause and furious typing. Stop right there. The shout cut through the applause like a knife. The cameras swiveled wildly. Julian stood up, throwing off his scarf. He pushed his way into the center aisle, marching toward the stage, followed closely by a grinning Victor Sterling. The press gasped. Julian Blackwood, the exiled nephew, crashing the most exclusive corporate event of the year. Julian, Arthur Blackwood, sitting in the front row of the executive section, stood up, his face draining of blood. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Sit down, father. Julian snapped, pointing a trembling finger at the stage. He turned to the sea of reporters. You want the truth about the Blackwood heir? That man standing up there is a fraud. He didn't marry for love. He married my fiancée to steal my child. Absolute chaos erupted. Flashes blinded the room. Reporters shouted over one another. He exiled me to Switzerland to keep me quiet. Julian screamed, his voice cracking with manic desperation. Leo is carrying my baby. Silas is barren, so he stole my bloodline to secure his power. I demand a paternity test. I demand the board launch a full investigation. Sterling stepped forward, holding up a thick manila folder. Sterling Global has independently verified these claims. Blackwood Enterprises is being run by a man committing massive paternity fraud and abusing his power to silence his own family. The noise was deafening. The entire empire was supposedly crashing down in real time. But on the stage, Silas did not flinch. He did not shout. He did not call for security. Silas Blackwood simply leaned closer to the microphone, his expression one of absolute, terrifying boredom. Are you quite finished, Julian? Silas's voice boomed over the speakers, cold and sharp enough to slice through steel. The absolute lack of panic in Silas's tone made the reporters instantly quiet down. Julian faltered, his manic energy hitting a solid brick wall. "You can't lie your way out of this, Uncle," Julian yelled, though his voice wavered. "We have the proof." "You have absolutely nothing," Silas said smoothly. He raised his hand, gesturing to his head of security. The massive digital screens behind Silas, which had been displaying the company logo, suddenly flickered. They didn't show medical records. They showed bank transfers, emails, audio waveforms. "What you are looking at," Silas addressed the silent, captivated room, "is a detailed, heavily documented trail of corporate espionage, embezzlement, and wire fraud." Julian's face went completely slack. The manila folder in Sterling's hand suddenly felt very heavy. "For the past 5 months," Silas continued, his voice echoing like a judge handing down a death sentence, "my nephew, Julian Blackwood, has been illegally funneling classified corporate data to Victor Sterling. He has embezzled over $14 million from our European subsidiaries to fund this pathetic smear campaign." Sterling took a step back, his smug smile completely vanishing. "This is a lie. This is a fabrication. Is it, Victor?" Silas asked, a dark, lethal smirk playing on his lips. "Because while you were busy trying to ruin my marriage, I was busy buying your debt. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Blackwood Enterprises executed a hostile takeover of Sterling Global. Your board voted you out 20 minutes ago. You are no longer a CEO, Victor. You are trespassing." The press went absolutely wild. It wasn't a scandal about Silas. It was the public execution of his greatest rival. Julian was hyperventilating, staggering backward. No, the baby. You stole my baby. Let us address that delusion once and for all," Silas said, stepping out from behind the podium. He walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at his trembling, broken nephew. "Biology does not make a father, Julian. The law does. And love does. Before I married Leo, I legally secured my parental rights through a closed, impenetrable judicial decree. I am recognized by the Supreme Court of this state as the sole, uncontested father of the child Leo is carrying." Julian dropped to his knees, tears of sheer terror spilling down his cheeks as the reality of his situation crushed him. "You have no rights. You have no fiancé. You have no child," Silas whispered, though the microphone caught every devastating word. "And as of this moment, you have no freedom." The double doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. 4 uniformed police officers marched down the aisle, handcuffs clinking at their belts. "Julian Blackwood and Victor Sterling," the lead detective announced. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and grand larceny." "Uncle, please," Julian sobbed, thrashing as the officers pulled his arms behind his back, the cold steel snapping shut around his wrists. "Please. I'm sorry. I'm your family." "I don't have a nephew," Silas replied, his voice devoid of any emotion. He turned his back on Julian completely. "Take them away." As the police dragged Julian out of the room, his desperate screams fading down the hallway, Silas turned back to the stunned reporters. He adjusted his cuffs, his composure entirely unruffled. "The press conference is concluded," Silas announced. "I need to get home to my husband." 3 weeks later. The pain was a blinding, all-consuming fire. I gripped the sterile white sheets of the hospital bed, my knuckles turning completely white, a ragged scream tearing from my throat. "Breathe, Leo, look at me. Look right at me." Silas's voice was the only anchor keeping me from floating away into the agony. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, completely ignoring the flurry of nurses around us. He had stripped off his suit jacket hours ago. His sleeves were rolled up, and his large, strong hands were gripping mine so tightly I could feel his pulse racing against my skin. "I can't," I sobbed, squeezing my eyes shut as another massive contraction ripped through my abdomen. "Silas, it hurts too much. I can't do it." "Yes, you can," Silas murmured fiercely, leaning in until his forehead was pressed tightly against mine. He was completely unfazed by the chaos, his entire universe narrowed down to me. "You are the strongest person I have ever met. I am right here. I am not letting you go. One more push, my love. Just one more." "Okay, Leo, this is it," Dr. Eris commanded from the foot of the bed. "On 3. 1, 2, 3, push." I threw my head back, pouring every ounce of strength, fear, and hope I had left into one final, agonizing push. The grip Silas had on my hand was like a vice, transferring his endless, immovable strength into my exhausted body. And then, the pain suddenly shattered, replaced by an overwhelming, breathless release. A split second of terrifying silence filled the room, and then a loud, furious, beautiful cry echoed off the walls. I collapsed back against the pillows, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't see anything through the blur of my tears, but I felt Silas let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "You did it," Silas choked out, his voice cracking completely. The invincible, terrifying CEO was crying. His hands were shaking as he reached up to gently brush the sweat-soaked hair from my forehead. "Leo, you did it. A healthy, beautiful baby boy," Dr. Eris announced warmly, wrapping the tiny, squirming newborn in a soft white blanket before stepping to the side of the bed. "Silas," I whispered, reaching out with a trembling hand. "Bring him to me." Dr. Eris carefully placed the bundle into Silas's large, shaking hands. Silas held the baby like he was holding the entire world. He looked down at the tiny, red, screaming face, and the look of absolute, soul-shattering devotion on his face was something I would remember until my dying breath. Silas slowly sat beside me, lowering his arms so the baby was resting on my chest. I wrapped my arms around my son, feeling the frantic, tiny heartbeat against my own. He was perfect. He was a miracle that had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and a war. "He's beautiful," I cried, pressing a kiss to the top of the baby's head. I looked up at Silas, whose dark eyes were swimming with tears. "He looks like you." Silas let out a wet laugh, shaking his head. "He looks like you, Leo. He has your light." Silas leaned down, wrapping his arms around both of us, burying his face in the space between my neck and the baby's shoulder. "What are we naming him?" Silas whispered against my skin. I didn't even have to think about it. "Elias is dead. Julian is gone. This is our new beginning." I looked down at the tiny boy who had finally stopped crying, his dark little eyes blinking up at us. "His name is Alexander. Alexander Blackwood." Silas tightened his grip, a profound, unshakable peace settling over him. "Alexander," he repeated softly. "My son." In the end, I had thought my life was over the day I stood outside that hotel room door. I thought I was nothing more than a placeholder, a comfortable option meant to be discarded. But the universe had simply broken me down to clear the path for the man who was meant to put me back together. Silas Blackwood didn't just save me. He chose me. Every single day, loudly, proudly, and without a shadow of a doubt. I wasn't a placeholder anymore. I was a husband. I was a father. And as I lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by the fierce, absolute love of the man who had burned down an empire to keep me safe, I knew I would never, ever be comfortable again. I was extraordinary. End of story. Wow, what a journey that was. Take a deep breath with me, because Leo and Silas's story was an absolute roller coaster from start to finish. Let's take a few minutes to unpack exactly why this story hits so hard. At its core, this isn't just a story about a billionaire romance or a dramatic family rivalry. It's a story about self-worth. In the beginning, Leo was trapped in a cycle so many people find themselves in, shrinking his own life to fit perfectly into someone else's. Julian called him comfortable. And honestly, is there any word more heartbreaking than that? Leo's betrayal was devastating, but it was also the ultimate catalyst. Sometimes, the house you built has to completely shatter so you can realize you were meant to live in a castle. And let's talk about Julian for a second. Julian represents the toxic idea of possession disguised as love. He didn't actually love Leo. He loved the idea of Leo always waiting for him. He wanted the excitement of a secret affair with Elias, while keeping Leo on a shelf like a safety net. Julian's absolute downfall wasn't just caused by Silas's money or power. It was caused by his own ego. He truly believed biology, and his family name gave him ownership over Leo and the baby. But love is an active choice, not an entitlement. Then, we have Silas Blackwood. Silas completely redefines the powerful CEO trope. Yes, he is ruthless, terrifying, and insanely powerful. But notice how he uses that power? Never to control Leo. He uses his power to build a fortress where Leo can finally feel safe enough to heal. Silas's most iconic moment isn't when he destroys his rivals in the boardroom. It's his stance on fatherhood, by looking Julian in the eye and saying, "Biology does not make a father. Devotion does." Silas breaks generational curses. He proves that true masculinity and real power are about protection, loyalty, and claiming your family out loud, without a single shadow of a doubt. This story reminds us that you should never, ever settle for being someone's comfortable backup plan. You deserve someone who looks at you like you are the only person in the room. Someone who will burn down their own empire before they let anyone disrespect you. But enough of my thoughts. I want to hear from you. What was your absolute favorite Silas moment? Do you think Julian's punishment at the end was satisfying enough? Let me know down in the comments. If you loved this emotional ride, please hit that like button, subscribe to your BL boyfriend, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, Never settle for less than you deserve. See you in the next video.